Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Work Matters and Happy New Year to you. I hope that 2021 has started off well for you. And however it was that you were able to or decided to celebrate the holidays and celebrate Christmas, we hope and we pray that it was a sweet time of celebrating the birth of Jesus and also of anticipating his return. I know in a season like this, it causes me to long more and more for that day. So I'm praying, come Lord Jesus, come soon, and maybe this is the year of his return. But you didn't come here for a sermon. You came here because you are interested in learning more about the work that others in our church are doing. And today's special guest is the one, the only, Ian Howes, and he has the dopest accent. You're going to hear him when he talks. Ian, how are you, my brother?
I'm good, Roddy. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you so much, man. It's great having you on here. Ian, I think you were certainly part of the elder board. And I remember meeting you when I came to interview at the Bible Church back in 2007. So we've known each other for quite a while, had your kids in youth ministry as well. And recently you and I have been able to connect again on business's mission and business for transformation stuff. So let's get going on that conversation. Could you tell us really quickly how you came to faith in Christ and then how you ended up at the Bible Church?
Yeah, I came to faith when I was about 29 years old, and I was working in DC. I had always wanted to move from the UK where I grew up when I was working to America. And I ended up getting a transfer with the company I was working for. If I had a list of all the things I had hoped to achieve, I think I had checked them all off, and I was still totally empty and lost. And I met a man at a football party, and he said to me, we were talking about being content, and he looked me straight in the eye and said, "You'll never be content until you have a relationship with the God that made you."
Wow.
And it was like a light bulb went off, and I said, "Boy, I'd like to hear more about that." And that began my journey.
That's wonderful. Now, what kind of football are you talking about here?
We're talking about the American football, not really the football, but
Okay.
it was a Washington Redskins game, Roddy.
I mean, God can use all things, right?
There you go.
Even American football. That's an amazing story, man. And I know you've been passionate about evangelism. We've had a lot of conversations about that too. And my experience is that when people come to faith a little bit later in life, like you did, that their passion for evangelism happens to be a little bit greater, because you remember life BC, right? You remember life before Christ better than people who come to faith as a child.
Oh yeah, no question. Yeah, a lot of mistakes.
So DC, and then how did you end up in North Carolina?
Yeah, I was, right after I came to faith, I started a business in DC, which is a long story, which I won't get into, but it subsequently failed. I had borrowed all sorts of money off I'd mortgaged my apartment. I had credit card debt out of the yin yang. I probably had a negative net worth of about $150,000. And this is, 30 odd years ago. And I was just looking for a job. And a friend of Meg's who lived in North Carolina sent me a newspaper ad from the News and Observer, and it said they were looking for a finance person for a biotech company. I had no idea what biotech was, but I applied for it and I got the job. So I moved to North Carolina. It was as simple as that.
Okay. And how long did you do that job?
For about 5 years. Biotech's pretty flaky. Companies come and go. That one actually went public and then it was acquired. So, I've changed jobs probably every 3 to 5 years on average.
Okay. And you've been in finance this whole time?
Yeah, I've usually these are very small little biotech companies. The biggest one is maybe 500 people, the smallest one, a dozen people. And I've usually just been the CFO. CFO for a little company doesn't mean too much, but yeah.
Sounds awesome.
That's what I've been doing, yeah.
That's awesome. And how did you find the Bible Church?
Yeah, so when we moved to North Carolina, we just started looking for different churches, and we'd gone to McLean Presbyterian Church, just outside Washington, D.C. We looked for another PCA church, and we found one. We found the Good Shepherd, actually. So we joined the Good Shepherd for maybe a year. And then we ended up at the Bible Church. And it was just very different. You know, it was very granola-y and guitars strumming. We weren't used to that. But I don't know, we stuck with it. And that was 1991, I think, or 92.
Okay.
It was a while ago.
That's 91. That's the year that I moved from Brazil to the U.S.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right.
There are big changes for both of us.
Yeah, for sure. Now, that wasn't North Carolina, though, was it?
No, it was to Tennessee.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did high school in Tennessee, the college in South Carolina, and then moved to North Carolina specifically for this job to serve at the Bible Church in 2007.
Yeah, and I remember our first meeting in, where was it? It was Bob Evans, I think.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Haven't been in that place in a while. So, Ian, really quickly, how do you, as a Christian, like, how does your faith inform the way you view finance, and whether it be corporate or just individual, personal?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I just want to pick on something you said earlier, Roddy, which is, when you come to faith later in life, the impact that man had on me when he told me, you'd never be content until you had a relationship with the God that made you, that really struck a chord. So that's the first thing that resonates. But honestly, in finance, I find there's a tension between, the world, and particularly these little VC-backed companies that are growing very aggressively. They're always pushing the envelope. And I find myself, in a wrestling match between doing what is expedient and doing what is right. So there's a tension there for sure.
Yeah, we had a call earlier, and this is a quick plug if you're watching this, and if you're a business owner and you're interested in connecting with other business owners at the Bible Church. Ian leads a discussion on Mondays at noon, and you can email him at
ian.howes at Anago, Anago, Accelerator.com.
Or you can contact me, Roddy, at biblechurch.org, and we'd be happy to get you connected. I'm part of those calls as well, and it's been really encouraging. And part of the discussion today was even on this matter of ownership and stewardship, and this tension and balance of how do we view money as Christians. So thanks for leading us in that, Ian. It's been really fruitful, and we look forward to having more people be a part of that. So I know several years ago, and I don't know if you're still involved with this, you were participating with some missional organizations, helping provide funding and coaching, if I understood correctly, for Christian business owners in other parts of the world. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it was 2014, and as I said, Roddy, I bounce between jobs pretty frequently because they blow up, and so I'm often in between jobs. So 2014, I think we had just sold a company, and I was figuring out what to do next. I ended up having a really interesting conversation with a financial planner in upstate New York, and we were talking about writing checks and giving them to tithing and writing a check. And really, he described it as you just lob the money over a wall, and you don't really know what goes on. He went down to, I think, Central America, and he said, I found myself on a missions trip, and I was laying bricks. And he said, I was doing a job that I would pay a laborer to do at my house in New York. And he said, I didn't even know what I was doing. And he said, there has to be a better way for him to use his financial skills. And he found it in a group called IBEX. And IBEX basically raises money and makes low interest loans to businesses, mission entrepreneurs in the 1040 window. And they used him to go and do due diligence trips to screen those companies and see if they were creditworthy before they got a loan. And he said, there's a demand for this, and if you're interested, why don't you, go on one of these trips? And I did, and I ended up doing two. I went to China, I think in 2015, and maybe the following year I went to Bangladesh. and just fascinating. And all of a sudden you can use your financial background, and the light bulb went off, and I spent a year after that working for a water company in the Congo and Uganda. And that was also interesting as well. And right at the end of that, Roddy, I realized that I still needed a paycheck, because I didn't have enough money to keep doing this forever. So I went back and got a normal job. But that really opened my eyes to what business's mission could be, and how we can use our skills to contribute to these things rather than just, aimlessly writing a check. And of course, you always need money. So I'm not minimizing the use of that, but it becomes a lot more fruitful and exciting when you can actually do something yourself.
Yeah, one thing I've appreciated that you've talked about in our last phone calls, and I'd love for you to share with our viewers, is the Venn diagram, the three legs of the stool of what makes a business be a business's mission. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, people define business's mission or business for transformation differently. Sometimes there's three legs, or sometimes there's four legs to the stool. But if you can imagine, it's a Venn diagram with three circles intersecting, and the first circle is the financial or economic stability of the company. So no company is going to make it unless it's financially viable. So that becomes the first leg. The second leg is, once you've got a financially viable company, how can you bless society, the people you're working within? So that would be your employees, your customers, suppliers, and the like. And then once you've done that, how can you leverage what you're doing there to share the good news of the gospel and the hope that you have within you? And I think they do have to go in that order, Roddy, because if you don't have a financially viable company, you can't do the other two. And secondly, the social leg of it, the creating an environment of thriving for the people you're working with, that often opens the door to the gospel. So other people, sometimes you see a fourth leg, which is an environmental stewardship model. So we want to be good stewards, and that would be a fourth leg as well.
Yeah, and the spiritual component, that's really what makes business's mission unique, right, from just business, right? Because most businesses obviously are looking to make a profit, and they're looking to have some kind of social impact, hopefully for the good, and they have environmental concerns, but bringing in that spiritual element is really what makes this unique.
Yeah, it's actually interesting, and this is probably more of a conversation than we have time for today, but I heard one person describe it, and they said, how would you feel if a Muslim moved from the Middle East and moved right next door to you, and they didn't have a job, and they kept inviting your neighbors around to study the Quran? How would you feel? And I was thinking, well, I think it was at a minimum a little bit strange. And he said, well, that's how, a lot of missionaries in the US have been doing missions work for a long time. But you would think it a lot less strange if that Muslim moved to the US, opened up a business, and started employing people and using that business to help communities thrive.
Yeah.
You'd have much more favorable attitude to that person. And that really made sense. So the business is, it's a springboard to help a community thrive. And when you do that, and it can be in all sorts of ways. We've seen examples of people setting up, for instance, IT shops in very poor parts of India where there's very low levels of employment. And if you can find the right employees, you can use that business to bless not just the employees but their families. So, yeah, it's a lovely model when it works, but it's hard, particularly outside the US, as you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, running a business here is complicated, right? And we kind of understand the system, and then you get into a different context, and it's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely not for the faint of heart.
No, and particularly, in some of these countries where, they don't look too favorably on women or Christians. So, sometimes you have to do this, with a very low profile.
Do you have a story from one of your trips that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, the trip to Bangladesh I thought was really interesting. It was a couple I think he used to work for Ford in the UK, and I think he was an engineer by training. He came to northern Bangladesh, which it was very close to the border of India. And I've never been to India, so I don't really know that part of India, but it's very poor, very poor. And he realized you could build these really lovely grass. Oh gosh, they were made from bamboo and a type of grass, the coffins. They were beautiful coffins anyway, and he would make them in northern Bangladesh and then sell them in Germany and the UK. And one of the things that struck me, he had a factory which, would never pass muster in the West, because the power was intermittent. There was, open windows. There was no air conditioning or heating. But he was looking for people to strip pieces of bamboo, and they had to basically take a bamboo cane and cut it into 4 pieces vertically. There was a line of maybe 50 people lining up for this job, which paid something like $10 a month. It was a very small amount of money, but in that area of the world, $10 a month actually went somewhere. So, and he employed, I think, 500 or 600 people. So, that was it. And they seemed to, they liked working there. They were productive, and the coffins were lovely.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I actually just got off a call right before you and I got on with a student who just graduated, and she went through the World Engagement Fellows program that I started last year, helping these students get more connected with the Great Commission, including through their work. And it was really interesting. She's trying to figure out, like most college students are, right? Or like you and I are from time to time, what am I going to do, right? What's next? And we talked about how, I think it was Dr. John Perkins who said that what people need is Jesus and jobs. And just thinking about, like, we as Christians, we should be like unapologetically committed to both of those things, right? We need to propagate the gospel, and we need to be really active in job creation. And I think that's a really good segue to what I'd love to ask you about next, because I know you are in the process of launching a new business in Durham through a ministry called Agape Corner, right? Why don't you tell us a bit about that? Tell us what you're doing. I'd love to hear the story of how you got involved with this and where your heart is behind it.
Yeah, well, I definitely can't take any credit for this, but it is an interesting story. So Agape Corner was a boarding school in East Durham on Holloway Street, about a mile east of the Deepak, which is a pretty rough part of Durham. The school was founded by a woman called Louise Rodebush in 1986. And for almost 30 years, it ran as a boarding school for kids, mainly from East Durham, but other kids, black and white, came from really all parts of the US. And the things they had in common generally were the dads were absent from the home and the mothers just couldn't cope. There was often, one or both parents were doing drugs. So these kids ended up at Agape Corner, and I'd say on average they had maybe 40 or 50 kids being taught. It was a school that was wholly supported by the community, and other local businesses would fund it. And I got involved in 91 when I was down here before I had kids, and I heard about it, and I offered to teach math in the evening to a couple of kids, which was just lovely. And I really got to love these 2 boys. They were, I don't know, maybe 13 or 14. And I did that for maybe 5 years or so. And then, I had kids of my own, and I just sort of lost touch. Well, Louise retired about 5 years ago. She handed the school over to a church, and they couldn't keep running it. And to cut a long story short, the school went out of business. The kids left, and she was left with, probably 8 or 9 different buildings on 2.5 acres.
Wow.
And as you know, Durham is now exploding. It's getting gentrified, and she really didn't know what to do. And um, actually, as a side piece of this really interesting story, over the 30 odd years she was running the school, people would just give her pieces of property. And of course, 20, 30 years ago, nobody wanted that property anyway. It was a pretty rough part of Durham. But nevertheless, she had been blessed. So we had land, and we had houses that were in pretty bad shape, and we had a school that was defunct. And she called me up. We'd stayed in touch, and we started talking about what we could do. And the idea we thought was she still wanted to pour into young people, and she thought the biggest problem wasn't so much young girls; it was young men, because the family structure, at least in that part of Durham, but I suspect it's really nationwide. One of the problems for the breakdown of the family structure is men have forgotten, or just simply don't, they're not stepping up as fathers. So I think the statistics are something quite shocking, like 8 out of 10 African American kids grow up in a house without a dad at home. And when that doesn't happen, the mother is forced to do 2 or 3 jobs, latchkey kids living with grandparents, etc., etc. So her idea was to try and rebuild this ministry, focusing on young men who are in their late teens and early 20s. So we had property. We didn't really have any cash. So the idea was, we thought we would sell some of the property, fix up some of the other houses, and we would start these homes, residential homes, where some of these young men could live with mentors. And a mentor might be a college graduate who is interested in living in a house with some of these mentees, I'll call them. We still haven't come up with a better name, honestly, but the idea there would be roughly 50% of mentors, maybe 3 mentors and 3 mentees in a house. They would live together, and the mentors would pour into the mentees. And the only requirement of the mentees was that they either had to be working or they had to go back to school and get trained. But the idea was that the mentors would be father figures, if you will, to the mentees, and they would show them what it was like to live in a sort of functional environment. And they would have Bible studies, and they would eat together, pray together, do sports together, do recreation together. So that was the goal. We quickly found out that didn't work too well. We couldn't find mentors for a start to step up. And the mentees we had, they didn't even understand the idea. When we painted a picture of these boys going into a subsidized home, being subsidized to go back to college and maybe learning to become an electrician or a plumber or something like that, and getting a job that might pay $50,000 or $60,000 a year. That was a vision many of these kids couldn't even grasp. I mean, they weren't living; they were living on people's couches, or they were homeless. Some of them had kids, with different women. The idea of stability didn't really register with them. And as we started thinking and praying about this, we realized an important piece of this would be to get these kids plugged into a business, but we didn't have a business. And as we were praying for this, I kid you not, I guess this happened in the late summer, a man approached us, and he said that his father had a screen printing business in Texas, and his uncle passed away. He needed to do something with the screen printing business, and the Lord had put on his heart to come and ask us if we wanted the business. So we said, well, yes. I don't know anything about a screen printing business, but he said, I'll tell you what, I will not only set it up, I will start running it, and I will get a book of business, and I will use some of these men you've got in the homes, and we will train them how to run a screen printing business. So this is a business that the last year was operational. 2 years ago, did a little bit shy of $1 million. So it's a legitimate business. It can probably employ a dozen kids. So it has taken us a while, and I can't say we have the business running just yet, but we are close. The printer has been moved from Texas to North Carolina. It's now in the old school building. We have it set up, and the idea is on January 1, it'll be functional, and we'll be running it with the help of this man who gave us the business, and also some of these kids. So, and I've been learning all sorts of things, Roddy, as I've been studying this BPT and BAM. The idea, initially I was thinking, boy, we're in a rough part of Durham, so we can just focus on low cost printing. But as I thought about it, I realized we have to do excellent work. And now this idea of being excellent, because this is really God's business. So we don't want to be the lowest cost printer. We want to be the best printer in Durham. And as crazy a goal as that sounds, I hope and I expect that we might be able to get close to that. So it's a work in progress. I got to tell you, it really is. But God's got his hand on this, and that makes it very exciting.
Amen. And I think too, just casting that vision for the kids, as you call them, who are working there, of let's be the best, let's be excellent, let's make beautiful work. I think that can be really inspiring for them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No question. Yeah, there was, we read somewhere, what is it? God just makes beautiful things. If you look around the world, I mean, the flowers and the sunsets and everything has beauty in it, and our business should be beautiful and good as well.
Maybe one last thing here, Ian. I would love to just hear you if you're okay with this. If not, we can cut the video. But just talking about the conversation we had earlier about what you and Meg are exploring doing, just because I think the reason I want to ask you about it is, what you're talking about doing with the business downtown with the printing. I mean, that's amazing, but that's a little intimidating too, right? Like for someone to say, wow, I'm going to get into something I have no idea about. There's a lot of cost and responsibility. But you and Meg are cooking up an idea here that is relatively simple, right? That people could kind of do on their own. And I would just love for you to share a little bit of that story. I know it's very nascent, but maybe it would inspire some of our viewers to consider similar things.
Yeah. So at the risk of sharing all our trade secrets here, Roddy. No, this was Meg's idea. So we had, or she had really noticed, we'd gone out for dinner at several Italian restaurants around town, and you often pay $20 or $30 for a meal, and the pasta just wasn't very good. And she makes great homemade pasta, and it's not all that difficult. She's got a mixer and a pasta maker, and she makes this stuff. And we thought, just as a really small business, what if we were to make some of this pasta and take it to the restaurants and say, I don't know where you're buying your pasta from. It's probably the grocery store, but you can buy it from us and we'll be competitive with our pricing. And then as we thought about it some more, we thought, if we can, my guess is restaurants would take that because it's just a better product than the food they're serving. And if they would do that, and there really was demand for that, then the question for us becomes, how could we scale that? So we like the idea because it's a business that you could probably run out of a kitchen in a restaurant right now. Many of these restaurants, their kitchens are closed or at less than full capacity. So we might be able to get the use of one of those. But even if we couldn't, it's not a very big investment. And we could start by making this pasta and just seeing if we can sell it. Mm-hmm. If we could sell it, then you can scale it. And if you can scale it, you've got a business. So it's not a big investment, and it's kind of fun trying. We'll just see where the Lord takes it.
That's awesome. Well, I look forward to trying it someday. If we need some taste testers, my family can throw down some pasta.
There you go, buddy. Be happy to.
Well, Ian, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you taking time to share. I think your story is absolutely fascinating, man, how the Lord has used your gifts in the UK, in the US, in Uganda, Bangladesh, China, Congo. You've done some work in Cameroon too, right?
No, not Cameroon.
Okay, no Cameroon. Maybe that's a prophetic thing of where you look towards next.
Yeah.
But thank you, brother, for your service here at the church. And again, friends, I hope you were inspired by Ian's story, and I'm sure he would love to connect with you. And again, an invitation for you to join us for these weekly calls on Mondays. We spend time together, we pray together, we ask questions, we help each other out, and we're really just trying to grow together in our service for the Lord. So again, Happy New Year, and hope to see you around soon. Thank you, brother. Bless you.
Thanks, Roddy.